All right, and shalom, 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 everybody. This is Evangelist James, and I'm with the NC-KJBU University, coming out of Durham, North Carolina. And today's teaching that I'm going to be bringing forth is entitled, Are We Sleep in the World or Sleep in Jehovah? So before we get started, I'm going to make this announcement as we usually make, that we here at the NC-KJBU University and the House of the Lost Sheep of Israel and the House of Jehovah, we are not affiliated with any Christian doctrines or any Christian organizations or any camp doctrines or any Black Hebrew Israelite camps or any ones who stand on the street corners and push the doctrines that they push. See, we here at NC-KJBU University in the House of the Lost Sheep of Israel and the House of Jehovah, we stand alone. We do not share notes. We do not study, or nor do we affiliate with any other outside organization outside of the NC-KJBU University and the House of the Lost Sheep of Israel. So we just want to make that clear. So, like I said, today, my brothers and sisters, we're looking at this teaching. We're looking at sleep. We're going to look at this understanding, being sleep in the world or sleep in Jehovah. So when we're looking at sleep, we can even see if one is asleep physically, they aren't actually active. So they aren't actually doing anything, but only idle. So they're completely unconscious and unaware of everything that's actually going on around them. So spiritually, to be asleep, but in the world, this is no different from one having their eyes closed to truth, being in darkness without any knowledge, instead of being aware of their surroundings and having understanding. So to be asleep in this world, one's eyes are closed, his understanding is shut, which is to be living in spiritual ignorance, separated from God, to be caught up in this flesh, resting in spiritual ignorance with no knowledge of Jehovah and void of understanding. But those that are asleep in Jehovah are those that are in spiritual rest. See, they have ceased from their own works, from their own labors and deeds according to this flesh. So their bodies have been mortified and put to rest. They've killed the works of this flesh and only live according to Jehovah through his spirit, which in return that brings us inner peace rather than the delusions and the false comforts that the world brings. So in this teaching, we want to be able to see the difference between the two. So we're going to get started in this. So those that are asleep in this world are those that are living in darkness and in spiritual ignorance. So we're going to start right here in Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to start at verse 2. And it says, and the earth, so the people, was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So this spiritual ignorance, this blindness, so they ain't had no understanding. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So when we're looking at this, we can see it says the earth, so the people was without form. So being without form is being without the likeness of something, because that form is speaking of a likeness. So they was without form. So they was without the likeness of something. So that's without the likeness of Jehovah. And being void is being empty and desolate of understanding, residing only in spiritual ignorance and blindness, having spiritual unawareness of their surroundings. Because what we have to understand is being without Jehovah's presence only leaves us desolate, and void of understanding. It would then only leave us in darkness because we have no form. We have no likeness of his image. That's why we can see this here. When we go over here to Genesis chapter 1, and we'll hit verse 26 down to 28. So we'll hit Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to the colon. And it says, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So after our form. And God created. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Verse 28. And God blessed them. So God gave wisdom to them. So we can see the difference. See, this is how we become formed in the likeness of Jehovah, by receiving his wisdom, giving us understanding and insight, being in that representation of his way. So I just wanted to show us this so we can see that when it says the earth, the people was without form, it's showing you that being without form is living without the spirit and not in Jehovah's image, without any guidance or understanding. Or so if we not walking in Jehovah's image, being a representation of his ways, his truth, and his customs, then his wisdom isn't in us. So that leaves us without form. That leaves us in darkness and in confusion, void of understanding. So the only way that we not in darkness is by if his light, his wisdom, and his truth is shining upon us. But if his light is not in us, then that leaves us desolate and void. That's why the people was without form and void of understanding, because they was not living in Jehovah's ways. They were living in ignorance and in their sins. But this is the very same thing that is happening to this very day, because this is speaking of us. See, many of us are still living in ignorance. Many of us are still without form, not representing the image of God, void, living in darkness and the foolishness of this world by going after vain imaginations of our heart. That's why we can even see this when we go over here to Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5. It tells us, it says, and God saw that the wickedness, so the evil, the unrighteousness of man was great in the earth. So it was great in the people, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So this is why I made that statement. To this very day, there's many of us that are living in spiritual ignorance and wickedness, going after the vain imaginations of our heart, because he telling you every imagination of the thoughts of his heart, of his desire, was only evil continually, because it's perpetual, it's endless, it's nonstop. So this flesh, this man, is constantly coming up with wicked devices and imaginations that are evil and contrary to Jehovah, because that's what the flesh is about. So this flesh is 100% contrary to Jehovah. It's 100% in opposition to the Spirit of God. That's why we can see when we go over here. Let me see. Yeah, we're going to go over here to Galatians. He tell us something. In Galatians chapter 5. Let's look here. In Galatians chapter 5, he tell us, it says what? For the flesh lusteth against the spirit, because it's contrary, and the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that you would. And he tell us in Romans. We hit Romans chapter 8. Let's hit Romans chapter 8. And we're going to hit verse 6 down to verse 8. And it says what? For to be carnally minded is death. So that's a separation from God. But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God. For it is not subject to the law of God. Neither in deed, neither in works can be. So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God, because it is impossible to be operating in the flesh and still believe that we can actually please God. There is nothing that we can actually do according to this flesh and think that it's going to please God. It's not going to happen. That's why I showed us from the very beginning of this teaching, the earth was without form and void, because the people, anybody that is in this world without Jehovah's presence, without that light being in us, it's impossible for us to be living in spirit without Jehovah's wisdom. So then that just leaves us void and desolate of understanding. So then we will only operate according to the flesh, which again is in 100% opposition to Jehovah. So if we operating in flesh, then that makes us wicked. That makes us contrary to God. That makes us enemies to Jehovah, being separated from him. That's the point I'm making. So flesh is contrary to Jehovah. The nature of flesh is against the nature of the spirit. So this is the point that I want all of us to understand. Before Jehovah formed us in his image, we was in flesh. So we were shaping in iniquity. This is what I want us to understand. That's why he even tell us when we go over here to Psalms. That's why he even tell us when we go over here to Psalms chapter 51. Let's look at something. In Psalms chapter 51 and verse 5, he tells us what? Behold. So remember. So we need to remember this. He said, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Why? Because we was all brought forth in this world in flesh, in sin, being mortal men. That's why we can see this when we go over here. When we go over here to Wisdom of Solomon. In Wisdom of Solomon chapter 7. In Wisdom of Solomon chapter 7, we're going to hit verse 1 and verse 2. And it says what? It says, I myself also am a mortal man. So this fleshly man, like unto all. Why? Because we all come from flesh. And the offspring, so the descendant of him that was first made of the earth. And in my mother's womb was fashioned to be flesh in the time of 10 months, being compacted in blood. So being compacted in the lifestyle of the seed of man and the pleasures that came with sleep. So this is showing us our mortal state, being in this flesh. See, we're going to look at this womb because this womb is speaking of this world, because this world is a matrix. And we should already understand this. Being that we are from the earth, we was brought forth in flesh in this world. So I want us to look at something with this womb, because we was all born into this world in sin. But once we receive the truth, we shouldn't be subjected to this world. But I want to show us something. So let's go over here to 2nd Idris. I want to show us something over here in 2nd Idris. Let's look at something here. In 2nd Idris, we're going to start at chapter 5. 2nd Idris chapter 5, and we're going to hit verse 46, and we're going to hit verse 47. 2nd Idris chapter 5, verse 46 and verse 47. It says what? And he said unto me, ask the womb of a woman, and say unto her, if, so providing thou bringest forth children, so providing thou bringest forth works, why doest thou it not together, but one after another? Pray her therefore to bring forth 10 children at once. And I said, she cannot, but must do it by distance of time. Why? Because one has to come after another. See, that's why we can even see this here. Let's go over here to 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and we're going to hit verse 46. He tells us, it says, howbeit, that was not first, which is spiritual, because that's being brought forth in the flesh, because that which is natural. And afterward, that which is spiritual, because the flesh comes first, and then afterwards, the spiritual. So unrighteousness always comes first, being in the flesh, and afterwards comes the spirit. So we have to overcome one in order to receive the other. They can't both be brought forth at the same time. That's why we can even see why this was here when we go over here to Genesis chapter 25. When we go to Genesis chapter 25, and we're going to hit verse 22 and verse 23. He tells us right here, and it says, and the children, so the work struggled together within her, so within the womb. And she said, provided it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Spirit of God. And the Spirit of God said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb. So these 2 nations are these divided customs, these divided ways are in thy womb. And 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. and the one people shall be stronger than the other. So one comes before the other, just as Esau came forth first before Jacob, because the flesh is always going to come forth before the spirit. So as unrighteousness will always come forth before righteousness. This is why the people was first without form and void and in darkness before God said, let there be light, because darkness, wickedness, and unrighteousness comes first, and then the light comes afterward. Just as all of us here were all brought forth in this world in iniquity, being in sin, being in flesh. Then afterwards, we came to the knowledge of the truth and received the light. But that is done through the process of time. See, these ways cannot be both brought forth at once. These customs and established practices are divided. These ways are divided. So either we're going to stay in the world, we're going to stay in the world and we're going to stay asleep and we're going to stay in darkness, plugged into this matrix, or we're going to be unplugged and live to Jehovah's customs, his ways and his truth. But the point is, we all in this matrix. We all in this world. We was all brought forth in this flesh, being from the earth, from the dust of the ground. So let's see something. Let's go back over here. Yes, we're going to go back over here, the 2nd Esdras chapter 5, and now we're going to hit verse 48. 2nd Esdras chapter 5, now we're going to hit verse 48 and verse 49. He tells us something. It says what? Then said he unto me, even so have I given the womb of the earth. So we see the womb of the earth, the womb of this people, to this ground, to those that be sown in it in their time, so in their seasons. For like as comparing, a young child may not bring forth the things that belong unto the aged, even so I have disposed the world which I created. So that's the point. It's a process that we have to go through, because even let's focus on this for a minute. So just as comparing a young child can only do the things of a child. So you can even look at a young child, a young babe. He's going to drink milk and he has to be nurtured and he has to be taught until he becomes older and he's weaned from the breast. Just as when we was living according to this world, we was as children on milk. And when we first came to the knowledge of the truth, until we could actually be weaned from it. That's why he even tell you here, when you go over here to 1 Corinthians, in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 11. That's why we can even see this here. It tell you, it said, when I was a child, I spake as a child, and I understood as a child. I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. But also keep in mind, young children also love to sleep. See, that's going to be key for us in this understanding. See, a young babe, he's either sleeping, eating, or crying. But once he's weaned from that milk and he starts to grow and mature, he becomes a man with more understanding, who's able to reason with wisdom and maturity. Now he can eat strong meat, those things which belongeth to the age, those that are well experienced and possess great wisdom and maturity and understanding. See, we can see this when we go over here to Hebrews. Let's go over here to Hebrews chapter 5. Hebrews chapter 5, and we'll hit verse 13. He tells us something. It says, for everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the words of righteousness, for he is a babe. Exactly the point, because being on milk is being on carnal understandings. See, you'll see many men and many women who are, especially in these church buildings and in these camps, see, they believe they have the truth and they believe that they're pushing spiritual knowledge, but are actually on 100% milk. They're babes, not in Christ, but they just ignorant in this world. They love to sleep. They love to slumber. Their understandings are closed. They learn and drink milk, these carnal understandings, just as a little babe. That's why they continue to teach that Jesus is God. That's why they teach these things, that a man came down from heaven. When he already tell you, according to the scripture, that God is not a man. And he tell you in John 4:24, God is a spirit, and we got to worship him in spirit and truth. But no matter what, these men and these women in these church buildings are going to stay on these carnal understandings. They're going to stay on the milk, sucking the milk of the Gentiles, of the heathens, of the unbelievers, these worldly doctrines, staying asleep in their flesh. Just as with the camps who believe that Yahweh is going to come down from heaven with a lightning bolt in his hand, dressed in costumes, sitting there mixing Bible with comic book characters, believing in UFOs, IFOs, thinking these are talking about chariots. See, these camps, they in a deeper hole than that's in the church buildings, even though they both in false doctrine and on carnal understanding. But these camps, they take it to a whole different level. So the issue is, when the truth comes, when sound, pure doctrine is before them, they reject it. Why? Because they not actually strong enough to eat it, or even to learn of it, or even to receive it. See, trying to feed a Christian or a camp person with pure doctrine of Jehovah is no different from trying to feed a little baby or a young child with no teeth a dang tomahawk steak and expect him to eat it, let alone is able to chew it. All he gonna do is end up trying to swallow it or choke or just spit it right back on out because he's not strong enough to receive it. But that's the point. The young child cannot bring forth the things of the aged because he does not possess the capability of one who is aged, who is seasoned and well experienced in doctrine and understanding. So that's why we should see, like as a young child may not bring forth the things that belong to the aged. That's the point. But we see here in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14, but strong doctrine belongeth to them that are of full age, that are of full of wisdom and full of knowledge, even those who by reason, by understanding, who use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So this is the point. That's why I say, once we become weaned from the milk, we should start maturing in our understanding, being able to reason with good judgment and discernment. But these Christians and these camps, they believe that they have understanding, but then they want to tell you about fairy tales and comic books. Make that make sense. They believe they have understanding, but their eyes are still closed. So these that are of full age, see, these possess much experience, not only in life, but also in great wisdom and understanding of the scriptures, who possess good judgment and understanding, who can rightly divide the word of truth and use their life experiences and the things that they've been through to even teach others with the wisdom granted unto them from Jehovah, with discernment to make a separation between what is good and what is evil. But again, you have men that believe just because they've been around in the world for a long time, they believe that just makes them wise. And that is not true. See, you can have a man who's 70 plus years old and he could have been claiming, well, shoot, I've been teaching the Bible for 50 years and he still sit there and won't know a thing about God. You know why? Because he was never weaned from the milk of carnal understanding. He stayed a babe all his life. He stayed asleep in those church buildings and false congregations for his entire life. But he think he's woke. And that's the worst part about it. Because many that believe that they have the truth and they don't. They don't even recognize that they still sleep. Because again, this world, this matrix was made for many, but few are actually going to find the truth. That's why he even tell us when we go over here to, that's why he even tell us when we go over here to 2nd Esdras, chapter 8. He tell us in verse 1, it says what? He answered and said, he answered me saying, the Most High had made this world for many, but the world to come for few. Yeah, because all of us here, we in this world, we all been created in this world. We all in the womb of this world, in this matrix. But those who choose to live in unrighteousness are choosing to stay in sin, because a lot of us are going to choose to stay asleep. Meaning a lot of us are going to choose to stay tied to this world. We're going to stay plugged into this world and live after the flesh. But the world to come is for few. So these few are they that wake up from their sleep. They unplug from this world, from the customs, the ways, and the practices of it, and stop living according to the flesh. They overcome their fleshly nature and are brought forth according to the Spirit. So again, there's a separation between the two. See, Yahushua even confirms this same principle that's being spoken. We even gonna see, we even say it, because they like to sit there and say, well, the Apocrypha, it's in the Bible, but it's not of the Bible. Okay, well then you must be calling Yahushua a liar, because same thing, he even tell you right here. He tell you the same thing. It says what? Matthew 22:14. For many are called, but few are chosen. You see that? So many of us are called. Many of us are called to wake up out of our sleep. Many of us are called to the truth, but there are few who actually awake. They rise up from their beds, from their own resting places, and their eyes have been opened to truth, who actually receive it, who actually live in the light. But you still have many who will still choose to live in darkness, who like to walk in night, who like to walk in the night. See, this is why we can even see this here. When we go over here to John, let's look at something. This is why we can even see this here. Let's go over here to John. In John chapter 3, we're going to look at something here. We're going to read this down for a bit, because we want to see exactly what's going on here. So let's look at John chapter 3, and we're going to take it from verse 1, and we're going to take it to 10. In John chapter 3, we're going to start at verse 1, we're going to take it to 10. And it says what? There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. The same came to Jesus by night. See, I ain't went to the Spirit. Matter of fact, I just want to do this. So just make sure that we all on the same page here. So let's see something. When you go to night, you can see yesterday, separation, but then you can see his disobedience, wickedness, darkness. So you can see night is tying you to disobedience, it's wickedness, it's in darkness. But I want to see it. I want to show us something. See, I was going to show this earlier, but I didn't. So I want to go to darkness. You see how darkness is tied to ignorance? We see that there. We see how darkness is tying us to spiritual ignorance, sinfulness, blindness, spiritual blindness, no understanding. But then I want to show us something. So if we in darkness, that means we're in spiritual ignorance. That means we're blind. We're blind to the understanding. But then if we look at ignorance, I want to show us what ignorance is tied to. So just to make sure, we see this ignorance, we see sleep, slumber. See, this is what we actually been talking about the entire time. See, I didn't say this at the beginning, but we should be understanding that when we talking about being asleep in the world, this is what we talking about. We ain't talking about no physical sleep. We sitting here in ignorance. We sitting here in darkness. We sitting here with no understanding, in spiritual ignorance on what we actually should understand, but we not. See, this is why he came at night. So that's why I want us to understand. I just want to show us that now, just to make sure that we all on the same page moving forward. So this Nicodemus, the same came to Jesus by night. So see, but this right here, this is exactly how a lot of us even like to come. We like to come at night. Why? Because we like to stay hidden. See, we don't want nobody to know that we don't have understanding on something. But guess what? That's ignorance. That's ignorance. Still don't change what it is. So it's showing that we don't have understanding. See, this is why we don't like to ask questions openly, but we only want to do it in private, because we want to stay concealed, but not realizing with that same mindset, we still operating in flesh. We still operating in disobedience and in wickedness. We still being contrary to Jehovah, no matter what. But for whatever reason, we not understanding that. But this also is actually let you know that Nicodemus, he was asleep. He was asleep in his flesh, because Nicodemus, he had a carnal understanding. He was ignorant in understanding of spiritual things, because he was looking at everything according to a fleshly understanding. We actually going to see this. See, this is why he needed to be taught again, because even though this man was way older than Yahushua, being a teacher of the Jews, he was still a babe in understanding. That's why I said that earlier. See, you can have a man who he can be old, he can been living for a long time, But guess what? It don't matter if he's been a babe in understanding all his life. He been asleep all his life. He's been living in ignorance all his life. We gonna see it. He said what? He said, Rabbi, we know that thou in your perfection and beauty, a teacher come from God. For no man can do these miracles that thou doest, except God be with him. And Yahweh answered and said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a male or female be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Watch his response. Nicodemus said unto him, How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb and be born? So we can see this is exactly what I meant. Yahweh was speaking to him in a parable. Nicodemus immediately leaned to his own understanding, looking at it carnally. See, the statement that he made completely no sense, but that's showing you he was in ignorance. He was blind to spiritual understanding because he was asleep. He's in darkness. That's why he came at night. This is reflecting his own spiritual condition, being ignorant to spiritual understanding. He said what? Yahweh answered, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born, which is brought forth of the flesh is flesh, and that which is brought forth of the spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, ye must be brought forth again. So we have to see this separation. This is what we've been speaking about the entire time. This is showing you how we must have this spiritual transformation that we must go through. We have to be brought forth of water, so of the knowledge of God, and of the spirit. So we need the spirit in us to lead us and guide us. We have to go from living in dead works according to the flesh to living according to the spirit. This is what he was showing them. But this confirms the same thing that we was talking about earlier. See, again, we was all brought forth from this world in flesh because we was all shaping in iniquity, being from the earth, being without form and void and in darkness. That was the point, because that which is born of flesh is flesh, because the flesh is going to come first. But we have to transition from that. We have to go from death to life. We have to receive the knowledge of Jehovah. We have to receive his light and his wisdom and live in his image, being in his representation, being brought forth of his knowledge and of his spirit. This is all he getting into. He tell him, the wind bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof, but canst not tell whence it cometh, and whither it goeth. So is everyone that is born of spirit, brought forth of the spirit. Nicodemus answered and said to him, How can these things be? Yahweh said unto him, In your perfection and beauty, a master of Israel, ain't you a teacher in Israel, and knowest not these things? Again, showing you, he's asleep. He's caught up in his flesh on carnal understanding because he still don't get it, even though it was clearly explained. And he's supposed to be a teacher in Israel and he don't get it. That's why I say you can have someone who's old and who's been living in this world for a long time. And they will tell you, well, I've been reading the Bible for my entire life. But then they still see everything carnally. Never ever came to the knowledge of the truth. They stayed on milk for their entire life. So when truth comes, when pure doctrine is put in the presence of them, they confused. They don't get it. It's strange to them. Sitting there telling, you bringing strange things to my ears. This ain't what I was taught growing up. I don't get this. I don't understand what you speaking. See, this is what we do. This is the same thing here with Nicodemus. See, he should have been well seasoned in doctrines and teachings, but he wasn't. When he ought to have been a teacher, he had need that one teach him again. Just like these same fools in these buildings and on these corners, believing just because they read the Bible 10,000 times and for years that they believe that that automatically qualifies them to be teachers when they haven't been properly taught anything according to scripture. That's why we have the problem. That's why we have all this craziness and this stupidity and this false doctrine going around here in this world. This is why we have this issue. That's why we can't even see. Let's go over here to Isaiah. Let's go over here to Isaiah. Let's look at something. In Isaiah chapter 56, we're going to hit verse 10. It says what? His watchmen are blind because they don't have no understanding. They are all ignorant because they sleep. They in darkness. They blind. They all are dumb dogs. They cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber because they don't have any type of labor towards Jehovah. Everything they do is for their own gain, for their own benefit, not for the people, but for their own advantage. These same men, they are not true watchmen of Jehovah, because if so, they would be warning the people, not sitting up in no building, not sitting on no corner, not telling you about Jesus as God when he was a man, a prophet of the Most High. They wouldn't be sitting there turning the Bible into fairy tales and these superstitious beliefs, thinking that snakes can talk, believing that Noah took a whole bunch of animals on a boat, believing in dragons and dinosaurs, believing that people going to be raptured up in the sky and teleported in UFOs and all this craziness. If these same men were true watchmen of Jehovah, they wouldn't teach this stupid crap, but they do. Because they don't study and they haven't been properly taught anything, but they want to teach. Just want to stand in front of the congregation and rule over people to be seen, but have no works and have no fruit to show for it. Just like here. Because again, if Nicodemus was truly a teacher in Israel, then he should have already known, according to scripture, that Jehovah speaks in parables. This should have already been known, but it wasn't. Because he tell you right here in Isaiah chapter 78 and verse 2, he tell you what? It says what? I will open my mouth in a parable, and I will utter dark sayings of old. And also what? He speaks in similitudes out of the mouth of his prophets. He tells us this. He tells us all these things. These are things that should already have been known. He tells us this. When we go over here, let's look at it. In Hosea chapter 12. Let's go over here. He says in Hosea chapter 12 and verse 10, he says what? I have also spoken by the prophets, by the mouthpieces, and I have multiplied visions and used similitudes. He used parables. By what? By the ministry of the prophets. So for Nicodemus, remember what this man said. He said, we know that thou in your perfection of beauty, a teacher come from God. So for him to even acknowledge that Yahushua as a teacher sent from God, he should have already understood this. Because even Yahushua himself even confirms this. When we go over here to Matthew chapter 13, and we'll hit verse 34 and verse 35. He says what? All these things spake Jesus, spake Yahushua unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable spake he not unto them, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables, and I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. If he's going to acknowledge, oh, well, you a teacher from God, why he don't know this? He should have already understood this, but it was clear that he didn't. Because again, to the ignorant and to the unlearned, these things that are spoken, they're foolishness unto them. That's why we can even see when we go over here to 1 Corinthians chapter 2, and we hit verse 14. That's why we can't even see. It says what? But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Exactly the point. So to the natural man, to the carnal man, these spiritual things are foolishness to him, because he's not going to get it, nor is he going to consider the matter. Matter of fact, I'll even show this here. See, let me go to this based on what I just said. I'm gonna show you, because to the natural man, to the carnal man, he ain't gonna consider the matter. He ain't gonna consider anything. That's why he even tell you, because he's asleep. That's why he tell you in Sirach chapter 22. Let's look at something. In Sirach chapter 22 and verse 8, he tell you something right here. Sirach chapter 22 and verse 8, and it says what? He that telleth a tale to a fool, to the unwise, speaketh to one in slumber. So he's speaking to one that's asleep, that's in his ignorance, because his understanding is closed. When he have told his tale, he will say, what is the matter? Exactly the point. Because when we sitting there and we speaking or declaring a matter or giving discourse or teaching these spiritual matters in the ears of a fool, one who's unwise, one who's unlearned, one who's still on carnal worldly understanding, first thing he gonna say, what's the matter? I don't get it. Why? Because he can't even expound on anything that you just said, or even regurgitate back to you the understanding, because they sleep. He can't comprehend what's being spoken because they too caught up in the world. They too caught up in their flesh. Their eyes have not been open to the spiritual understanding of what the book is actually saying, because they still looking at the words on the page for face value. They don't meditate. They don't consider anything, and don't even understand that their understandings have been closed from receiving spiritual knowledge. People say, oh, what? Yeah. Yeah. That's why you can even see. That's why you can see in Isaiah. That's why you can even see in Isaiah chapter 29. Isaiah chapter 29 and verse 10. He tell you something right here. Isaiah chapter 29 verse 10. It says what? For the Spirit of God. Hey, you see you doing this. For the Spirit of God have poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and have closed your eyes and have closed your understandings. The prophets and your rulers, the seers, have he covered. Just as with Nicodemus, his eyes were shut to the understanding. Even though he was hearing everything that was coming out of Yahushua mouth through the word of Jehovah, he didn't comprehend it. That's the point. So this is no different from today. Again, many men and many women in these false doctrines, in these buildings, eyes have been shut to the understanding. That same spirit of deep sleep has been casted over them. They can't see what the truth is. Even though they have a Bible right there in front of their faces, they just reading words on the page, but lack the spiritual understanding of what's actually being said. They got eyes to see, but they see not. They got ears to hear, but they hear not. Neither do they understand, because they don't want to understand. That's the point. Even many of us, we stand, because many of us, when we stay in our flesh, we stay locked away from the spiritual understandings of this Bible and Jehovah's truth, not because we can't receive it, but because we choose to reject truth. We choose to rebel against his word. Because again, why would Jehovah shut someone away from seeing what the truth is if their desire was truly towards him? That don't even make sense. Why would you do that? But it happens because, as you can see, when we go over here to Isaiah chapter 59 and verse 2, he even tell us here, it says what? But your iniquities, but your acts of sins have separated between you and your God. And your sins have hid his face, have hid his presence from you. That's why. The only reason many people stay asleep because they choose to be slothful. They choose to be slack towards God and stay idle in those churches and those camps. They choose to stay in sin. Even here, many of us hear the words that's being spoken, but we don't follow it. We choose to be idle and refuse to put in the work towards God as we should. We come here week by week, day by day, but don't labor. We just come here to sit around, hang out, and eat grapes. So many of us, we think we woke. We think we have true understanding, but we really still asleep and don't even know it, because we still choose to rebel against God and stay in our flesh and in our disobedience. But then we think we're doing something. But he tell us something. Let's see what he gonna tell us. He tell us, let's go to 2 Thessalonians. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and we're going to hit verse 3 and verse 4. It says what? Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, so that servant of Satan, that servant of destruction, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worship, so that he, as comparing God, sitteth in the temple of God. So in our bodies, showing himself that he is God. Because we sitting there exalting ourselves in our own way, that's showing that we of another spirit. It ain't of the spirit of Jehovah, because our bodies are supposed to be temples of Jehovah. But when we sitting there and we rebelling against Jehovah, and we choose to continue to disobey his word and do our own will, now we think we God. Now we think we can pick and choose and do whatever we want to do and what we not going to do. We putting ourselves on a pedestal. So the more we choose to rebel against God, the quicker we going to fall away. But all that is going to show is we was never tired of God in the first place. You want to know why? I'm going to show you why. Let's go over here to John. I'm going to show you why. Let's go over here to John chapter 17. In John chapter 17 and verse 12, he going to tell us something right here. It says what? You see, while I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. So I kept them in thy way. Those that thou gavest me, I have kept. And none of them is lost. But the son of perdition, but that servant of Satan, that the scripture might be fulfilled. Exactly the point. So guess what? If the truth came to you and we don't receive it, and you fall away and you choose to walk away from the truth, then that's showing you didn't have anything to do with God in the first place. You was never one of his, because the spirit, this is the spirit speaking. Jehovah is telling us none of them is lost. Not one of his, but the servant of perdition. That's why you can see that. That's why you can see those of us, see, all of us was sleep in this world at one point. We was all living according to the flesh. Even though all of us at one point in our lives was living in ignorances, Jehovah, he didn't forsake us. His truth came to us. That light shined upon us at some point, because those that are his, he is going to open their eyes to the truth, because his sheep hear his voice and follow the word no matter what. That's the point. But those that aren't his, they are going to stay asleep. Their eyes are going to stay closed, even if they hear the truth. Because they're going to choose to stay in their flesh. They're going to choose to rebel against his word. They're going to choose death and the pleasures of this life over the pleasures of God. They're going to choose the things that please our flesh over life and peace with Jehovah. These things are going to happen. And all that's going to do is fulfill what must happen, because that path was already chosen for them. They just can't see it because they blind to it and won't even realize it until it's too late to change. That's the worst part. Being the servants of perdition, set for destruction. As we can see, as we go back over here to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, now we'll hit verse 7 and we'll take it down to verse 12. And he tells us, it says what? For the mystery of iniquity, of acts of sin, doeth already work. Yeah, it's already in the works. Only he that now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. That's why I say, we going to do it to ourselves. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness in them and of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love, they receive not the promise of the truth, that they might be saved. Why? Because it wasn't received in our hearts. It never took root. Our heart stays stony. The seed couldn't take root in stony ground. So the word can't penetrate a hardened heart. One who's stubborn, one who's disobedient, who's rebellious and stiff-necked, no matter what, always going to choose to rebel and make an excuse for their sin. So they never going to change. And for this cause, God should send them strong delusion. So this falsehood, this blindness, that they should believe a lie, that they might all be damned who believe not in the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. This is that deep sleep, that spirit of slumber. That's why we can even see here, even like he says in Romans chapter 11 and Romans chapter 11 and verse 8. He says here, it says what? According as it is written, God have given them the spirit of slumber. Eyes that they should not see and ears that they should not hear unto this day, unto this very day. That's why I keep saying that. Unto this very day, that they all might be damned, who had believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Because many people are going to continue to take pleasure and find delight in unrighteousness in this world. That's why I said, when people choose to stay in those buildings after the truth came to them and they reject it, understand what's actually happening. They taking pleasure in unrighteousness after being shown that God is not in those buildings and he don't dwell in those temples made with hands. So when these camps are shown that their doctrines are a lie, and the 12 tribes chart is false, and Esau ain't the white man, and UFOs is false, and all these things they push is false, and they still choose to refuse to hearken, even though you can sit right there and see it right there in a book, but their eyes remain closed and locked away from the understanding, and they refuse to come out of those places. Understand what's going on. So any of our loved ones Many of our family members and friends who have chosen to remain in those places because they stubborn and have taken pleasure in unrighteousness. He's telling you clear as day. He's going to keep that strong delusion over them. That spirit of slumber, that deep sleep is casted over these people. So this is why no matter what you say to them, they can't see it. They can't understand it because their eyes have been closed. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, it ain't going to happen. People say, well, dang, I keep trying to talk to them and they just ain't getting it. Their eyes are closed. The spirit of slumber is upon them. They caught in a strong delusion. So why you keep going back to them when he's telling you exactly what's going on? So that's what I'm saying. Don't sit here and play the game. But guess what? The same thing goes for us. If we come over here and we receive the truth and we still choose to go back into the world and rebel against the word and do our own pleasures of unrighteous acts and deeds, then that goes for us too. Because that shows that the word never really resonated in our hearts and took root. We just endured for a time. And after a while, when these distractions and these cares of the world arise, now it draws away our attention. Now we fall away. So if that happens, then it shows you we was only caught up in our flesh. We don't meditate on anything. We don't want to do our studies. We put worldly concerns over spiritual matters every single time. And this is showing those of us who do this, we won't ever the servants of God, but servants of Satan. That these same ones are set for destruction, choosing to be enemies of Jehovah. Because again, the flesh is in opposition to God. So it can't please God. So those that are operating in the flesh are enemies to God. It's that straightforward. It's that straightforward. So he tell us, we go over here to Psalms chapter 69. Let's look at something. In Psalms chapter 69, and what he tell us? In verse 22. So we know it ain't a game that he playing with us. In Psalms chapter 69, verse 22, he tell us something. It says what? Let their table, so let their abundance of things become a snare in the presence of them. And that which should have been for their welfare, let it become a trap. So those abundance of things that are set before us, that are supposed to be for our good, this wisdom, this knowledge and understanding, those things that are set before us are going to become a stumbling block unto us. Why? Because if you sitting here and you've heard the truth, you can't say you don't know. So to hear the truth and to be in the presence of understanding and to still choose to rebel and to still choose not to meditate. Shoot, Evangelist Jonathan just let us know on Monday. We don't desire to meditate on these parables, these abundance of knowledges that's set before us and ask the questions and get the understanding. He showed us how we sat there and went to the feast just to be there and be in the presence of a true teacher of God and had the opportunity to gain all the understanding we can get, but we chose to sleep. We chose to get into other things and feed our flesh instead of our spirit. So guess what? That same abundance of things that's put before us that should help us get closer to God, that should have been our welfare, is going to separate us from God. Now it's going to become a stumbling block because we ain't get it. We're going to stay blind to the truth. And once you come to the knowledge of the truth, once we know what's going on, what we supposed to be doing, it ain't no more sacrifice for sins. So if we continue to stay in sin and disobedience after knowing the truth, now it becomes a stumbling block. Because providing we don't correct it and stop doing what we doing, when we stand before God, you can't come to God and say, well, Lord, I didn't know. Lord, I didn't know. No, you clearly knew because we was told. So he's going to recompense us according to our works, good and bad. And exactly what we rightfully deserve. So those that choose death, that choose to rebel, he telling you. He telling us, let's go over here. Let's look at Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 8. In Isaiah chapter 8 and then verse 15, and we hit verse 16. He tell us something. Isaiah chapter 8 starting at verse 15. It says, and many among them, so many among us, many of us shall stumble and fall and be broken and be snared and be taken. Why? Because we too daggone caught up so far into this world and we think we gonna still receive the things of God. But he tell you, bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples. So among the believers. So guess what? He's going to seal his law. He's going to seal his truth among those that are truly following God. The true believers. That's who he's going to seal it amongst. The true followers in the faith. These that are truly seeking after God. But those of us who choose to stay asleep, those of us who choose to stay idle, and we just want to sit back and eat grapes and just come and hang out, then guess what? There's no light in you. Because you're not doing according to his word. Remember those 10 virgins we spoke about last week? When their lamps went out because they didn't have no light in their vessels? They refused to be obedient to Jehovah's voice. They refused to hearken unto the warnings when they go out and make those adjustments. Guess what? We refuse to do the same thing. He tells us in Isaiah chapter 8 and verse 20. Isaiah chapter 8 verse 20, it says, to the law and to the testimony, providing they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. So this is what our problem is. See, men, we love darkness rather than light. We love our flesh more than receiving the truth. That's why he tells us. In John chapter 3. In John chapter 3 and what? Verse 19. He tells us something. John chapter 3 verse 19. It says, and this is the condemnation. This is the judgment. That light is coming to the world. And men love darkness rather than light because their deeds, their works were evil. So the light has came into the world. We can't say it hasn't because each and every single one of us have been partakers of the truth. But when we sit there and we choose to stay in our fleshly ways and we choosing to stay asleep, we caught up in fear and pride. We choose in darkness over light. We choosing ignorance and folly over what Jehovah has offered us. Don't you know? Every time we in these teachings and we go in these Zooms and we go to these feasts, we in the presence of the light because Jehovah, he's going to be residing in his pastor and his teachers. And we sit there and we refuse to even draw closer and we choose to stand back and never say anything or seek counsel. And we just wait around and don't like to ask questions or say anything. But we just wait and we just wait, being idle. We just like to sit around and stand afar off. And we choose to stay quiet, to choose to stay to ourselves and don't engage in fellowship. Don't you know we choosing to stay in darkness? Because we choosing ignorance over receiving understanding. Because how can we receive understanding if we don't draw closer to where the light is? But then we want to come at night. When then we going to turn around, we want to come at night when nobody around. We want to start creeping and ask things in secret. You see what the problem is? Do we see what the problem is? So these same ones, those of us who do this, these are not his disciples. These are not true believers that's going to seek the understanding while the light is in the world. Well, guess what? He's going to seal the law among his disciples. But those that want to stay in darkness, he's cutting those off. These are they that would be broken, snared, and taken. Because we're going to be too caught up in our flesh because of our own pride and our own fear. So we choose to stay in darkness. We choose to stay in our own wickedness. So he tells us as we go back over here to Psalms, let's look at it. Psalms chapter 69. He tells us as we go back over here to Psalms chapter 69, we hit verse 23. Verse 23 down to verse 25, he says what? Let their eyes, so let their understandings be darkened, that they see not, and make their loins continually to shake. Pour out indignation upon them, and let thy wrathful anger take hold of them. Let their habitations be desolate. So let it be empty. Let it be void. And let none dwell in their tents. Why? The Spirit is supposed to be dwelling with us. But he's saying, don't let none dwell there. So we can see how serious this is. So we can't sit here and play this game. Because like I said earlier, the earth, these people to this very day are still without form and void and are in darkness. It's many of us that's void. That's empty and desolate. That's sitting in spiritual ignorance, sleep in this world. That's why we can even see, he even tell us when we go over here to, the first Corinthians chapter 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, he tell us in verse 30. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 30, it says, For this cause, many are weak. So it's many that's sick. It's many that's feeble and sickly among you. And many sleep. So it's many that's in ignorance, that's blind to what the truth is. Exactly the point. It's many among us right now that sleep, that's living in ignorance, that's blind to the truth. But that's because we caught in this flesh. We into too many worldly distractions and we refuse to get out of it. Because the initial point that I was showing was that being in the flesh, operating with a carnal mind, is going to keep us in darkness and it's going to keep us asleep in the world. I just wanted to show us how all of this was tying together. But again, point is, all men are made from the ground and we are from the earth. But still, that separation has to be made. He got to make that separation. That's why we can even see when we go over here to Sirach chapter 33. In Sirach chapter 33, we're going to hit verse 10 and verse 11. It says what? It says, all men are from the ground and Adam was created of the earth. So we can see Adam, this is us. We come from the earth. This is Jehovah's people. But remember, the earth was void and without form. So that let you know he was talking about us the entire time. So don't sit there and say that somebody else. No, we need to be looking at us. We don't need to be looking at nobody else. He's speaking to us. So until we received this wisdom from Jehovah, until that light came, we was desolate. But still, a lot of us still refuse it. That's why we can even see when we go over here to John chapter 1, he even tell us in John chapter 1 and verse 5, he tell us what? And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended not. So the ones that sleep, the ones that's in ignorance, they ain't even gonna comprehend what the truth is. Verse 10 and verse 11, he said what? He was in the world, so the word, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came to his own, us. His own received him not, us. This is what I'm saying. This is what we do. But because of that, he made his separation. Back over here in Sirach 33:11. In much knowledge, the Creator have divided them and made their ways diverse. Some of them have he blessed and exalted, and some of them have he sanctified and set near to himself. But some of them have he cursed and brought low and turned out of their places. Exactly the point. Because there's a separation that's being made. But that's happening to this very day, right now. Jehovah is going to divide and separate those who are living in this world, who continue to find pleasure in this life, who are going to stay asleep, and those who are going to awake to truth and rest in him. So if we love the world, if we promise the world, then we desire to stay asleep. Then we want to stay separated from God. Then we want to stay in our ignorance. That's what we want to do. That's why we can even see this here when we go here to 1 John. Let's see it. And we can see when we go to 1 John chapter 2. In 1 John chapter 2, and we'll see verse 15 down to verse 17. Verse 15 down to verse 17, it says what? Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. Providing any male or female love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. However, he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. So we can clearly see that everything that's in this world, the lust of the flesh, this strong burning desire that we can have, these appetites, these cravings that we go after in this world, this is what the flesh desires. It's all going to pass away. The lust of the eyes, anything that catches our attention or our understanding or what draws us in, that entertains us. See, this is why we can even see, especially for us men. It's easy for us to get distracted. All it takes for us is for us to see a beautiful woman, and now our eyes start wandering, using poor judgment. Then we get caught up in lust and sensual desires. That can even be in person or even on the screen. See, flesh craves this. Women do it too. But men, we fall into this easily. But then you have a lot of women who easily get caught up in their own looks, in their own beauty. These things serve as stumbling blocks and distractions because it's of the world. Flesh itself is of the world. So if we love flesh, if we love everything that we can see physically, then that means we love the world more than we love God. So we gonna put our trust in the world more than we gonna put our trust in God. See, instead of seeking Jehovah's beauty, which is in his law, that he's gonna seal among his disciples, his true followers, we tend to get more caught up in the beauty of flesh. And guess what? None of it is of the Father, but it's all of the world. See, even entertainment as a whole serves as distractions. that then we'll call these things comfort. See, a lot of us, we find more comfort in worldly things than the rest that we should actually find in Jehovah. Why? Because we want to hear smooth things. We want to hear things that's pleasing and bring excitement to our flesh. That's why we can even see as we go over here. That's why we can even see as we go over here to Isaiah chapter 30. He tells us in Isaiah chapter 30, verse 9 and verse 10, it says what? This is a rebellious people, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Spirit of God, which say to the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits. So we rather hear smooth things. We rather hear things that's pleasing to our ears to make us feel good. See, this is exactly what those false prophets do in those buildings. They're going to tell you things that's going to make your flesh feel good, provide you with false hopes and false security. That's why we'll go back to them, thinking that being in this flesh is going to bring us some peace when it ain't no peace in this flesh. That's why he even tell you when we go over here to Jeremiah, we're going to see something here. When we go over here to Jeremiah chapter 12, and Jeremiah chapter 12, and he going to tell us in Jeremiah chapter 12 and verse 12, he tells us, he says, the spoilers are come upon all the high places through the wilderness. For the sword of the Spirit of God shall devour from one end of the land, even to the other end of the land. No flesh shall have peace. So you see what he's saying? Jehovah, he ain't come to bring peace to this world. Jehovah didn't come to bring peace and comfort to this flesh. His word came to separate and divide, not to bring peace to your flesh, not to bring comfort to your flesh and to the things that you desire in this life. That's why we can even see this here. When we go over here to Matthew, when we go to Matthew chapter 10, and he tells us in verse 34, it says what? He says, think not that I'm come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. So Jehovah, he didn't come to bring peace in this world. This world is full of unrighteousness and iniquity. That's why we seen that earlier. That's why I keep going back to it. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Every imagination of man was only wicked continually. That's why he even tell us here when we at Psalms chapter 14, and Psalms chapter 14 and verse 2 and verse 3, it said what? The Spirit of God looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand and seek God. They are all gone aside. They are all together become filthy. There is none that doeth good. No, not one. So this world is set in darkness. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, because we all are in this flesh. So Jehovah, the word, came not to make peace with this world. Understand that. His word did not come to make peace with your flesh. He didn't come to make you comfortable in your flesh. He came to separate us from the flesh, because that word is as a sword. It's going to cut and separate truth from unrighteousness. It's going to divide those who want to stay asleep in this world's wickedness from those who are going to truly live in Jehovah's way. That's why we can see this separation being made between those who want to stand false doctrines in the world and those who receive the truth and come out of those false doctrines and separate from them. But people believe that Jehovah came to bring peace, and he didn't. He came to make a separation. So this is why we can even see as we go over here to Wisdom of Solomon. Let's go over here to Wisdom of Solomon chapter 18. Wisdom of Solomon chapter 18, verse 15 and verse 16. It says what? Thine almighty word leaped down from heaven out of thy royal throne, as comparing a fierce man of war into a midst of a land of destruction, into us, into these bodies, and brought thy unfeigned commandment as comparing a sharp sword, and standing up filled all things with death. And it touched the heaven, but it stood upon the earth, because his word is going to make that separation amongst the people, dividing the people of God from those that's of the world. So as he says, we can see when we go over here to Exodus chapter 32, he tells us in Exodus chapter 32, we'll hit verse 26, and it says what? Then Moses, the word of truth, stood in the gate of the camp and said, who is on the Spirit of God's side? This same very question is being posed to each and every single one of us to this very day. Who is on the Lord's side? Who's faithful? Who's loyal? Who is devoted and joined unto Jehovah? Who has left off from all their worldly attachments and distractions in this world and cleave unto Jehovah? See, many of us will say this with our mouths, or we be quick to say it, but then we still choose to stand afar off. We still choose to do other things, thinking that we woke, but we still sleep, unconscious to spiritual understandings. Because if we gonna sit there and find comfort in our flesh, then we're gonna have a problem. Because he didn't come for that. The word came to destroy this flesh, to divide the truth of God from the lies that's pushed in this world. But if we're going to find comfort and pleasures in the things that we think brings us peace in this life, then that within itself is an issue. Because it's really going to cause us to be separated from God. That's why we can't even see. Because a lot of us think, well, shoot, I'm going to find peace. And okay, keep going around thinking that you're going to find your peace that you saying you're going to find. And okay, he tell you in Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 19 down to 21. Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 19 down to 21, it says, and it come to pass, when he heareth the words of this curse, that he bless himself in his heart, saying, I shall have peace. Oh, I'm going to have my peace. I'm going to have my peace. Though I live in imaginations of my heart to add drunkenness to thirst. The Spirit of God will not spare him. But then the anger of the Spirit of God and his jealousy shall smote against that man. And all the curses that are written in this book shall lie upon him. And the Spirit of God shall blot out his name from under heaven. And the Spirit of God shall separate him unto evil out of all the tribes of Israel, according to all the curses of the covenant that are written in this book. But you know how many of us that's gonna think that we're gonna have peace in this flesh? Thinking that the things in this life is going to provide us with peace, with comfort and security. Going after our own imaginations and the thoughts of our own mind. See, some of us feel like we secure in money, knowing eventually itself is going to perish. So how can it then bring you true peace when it's temporary and it comes and it goes? When wisdom, true riches are eternal, that never rust or fade away. But then you have some of us that feel comfort in idleness. Just even being in our own homes, thinking that just because we at home, we don't have to do anything. See, this is why I even brought up entertainment. Because do you know how much time actually passed by and how much time we actually waste when we sitting there pleasing our flesh? We glued to our phones and to a TV all day. See, I bring this up all the time, but I truly want us to understand. To our flesh, that feels good. Being able to kick back and chill without feeling the care in the world. See, to us, we believe just because nobody sees us that we good. Not understanding that Jehovah, he sees everything that we do. See, this is where we mess up at. Because he even tell us in Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 3. It says what? The eyes. So the understandings of the Spirit of God are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. So understand something. Just because we in the comfort of our own homes, we think we can just do things in secret. But if we not diligently putting in the work, and we not truly studying and meditating and doing what we supposed to be doing, and we just lounging around all day, or we just constantly distracted in other things that don't have nothing to do with God, wasting time. See, man won't see that, but Jehovah do. So we can sit here and fool man, but we're not fooling God. That's the point. Why? Because everything that we do is recorded. Everything that we do is recorded. That's why he even tell us in Deuteronomy chapter 30. Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 19. He says what? I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set in the presence of you life and death, blessing and cursing. For that reason choose life, that thou and thy seed may live. So every day that we go without doing our due diligence in this walk, but we choose to be slack and we choose to be idle, that's recorded. That's recorded against us. See, think about how that actually piles up. All that time, all those hours that we just spend lollygagging in our own pleasures and not towards God. All of that is being recorded. See, that's what I'm saying. We not gonna sit here and get around none of this. But then we like to sit there and come to the lessons and come in the Zooms and come to the events and try to appear righteous before men. But then as soon as we break and we go about our own business, we go right back to what we was doing previously. Sitting there can't wait for the teachings to be over. Can't wait for the Zoom sessions to end so we can go back to sleep. So we can go back to our own pleasures. Say we don't do it. You can't say we don't do this. As soon as the teaching ends, as soon as we get out of teaching session, the first thing we going to say is, oh, well, that was cool. That was a good lesson. Then we going to go right back. We're going to go right about our own business. Right back on our phones, scrolling, kicking back, doing other things, going about our own business, not meditating on what actually just went out, not going back over the notes. Nope, we close the laptop, you close the book, and go do whatever we want to do and never go back to it. We just move on. Say we don't do this. I want somebody to say that we don't do this. And then believe just because nobody don't see us, we think we safe. We think we secure. We'll crack up. I tell you, we as a people, we are 100% crack up. Not understanding again, all of that is being recorded against us. Everything that we do. So if we not focused and we constantly caught up in other things, then that seed that's planted in us, it ain't going to take root. It's not. Because we too distracted. That's why he even tell us when we go over here to Mark. When we go over here to Mark and he tell us in Mark chapter 4, we're going to hit verse 18 and verse 19. Mark chapter 4, he's going to tell us something. In verse 18 and verse 19, it says what? And these are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word. Yeah, we hear the word. But what? And the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things enter in, choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. So it becometh unprofitable. It becometh barren. So this represents these distractions and these cares of the word, these cares of the world. See, we can hear the word, we can tune in and receive the word, but we get caught up in distractions too easy. See, the more we stay concerned about worldly things, it's going to keep us idle. It's going to keep us from being unfruitful. It's going to keep us from growing. Because choosing to stay asleep, we're not being watchful. We're not being diligent. We distracted. We're not staying focused. See, this is what get us every time. See, I want to show us something. So then we can even see this. Even see how this even gets us caught up. So we're going to go over here to Mark chapter 14. Let's go to Mark chapter 14. We're going to hit verse 38. We're going to hit verse 38 down to 40. Mark chapter 14, verse 38 down to 40. He says something. It says what? Watch ye and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak. Because again, this flesh is from the earth. This flesh is in darkness. The flesh is in opposition to Jehovah. So the flesh is always going to be drawn to other things over God. So this is what we have to watch out for. We have to watch out for these distractions that come in that make us lose focus. He said, and again he went away and prayed and spake the same words. Watch this. And when he returned, he found them again. He found them asleep again. For their eyes were heavy, neither wist they what to answer him, because they couldn't, because they were asleep. They were distracted with the cares of this world. See, their eyes is their understandings. Their understandings was heavy. Understand what he's saying. Their understandings was heavy. See, they won't physically see. They was just caught up in their carnal thoughts and worldly things instead of where their focus should have been. Because if we caught up in our flesh, then our understandings will be heavy because it's going to weigh us down. Why? All right, we're going to confirm. Let's go over here. Let's go over here to 2nd Esdras, chapter 14. Second Esdras chapter 14, we're going to hit verse 14 and verse 15. He tells us, it says what? Let go from the immortal thoughts. Cast away the burdens of man. Put off now the weak nature, and set aside the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee, and haste thee to flee from these times. So this is why their thoughts was heavy. This fleshly mind, this carnal mind is what weighs us down. As he says in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 9 and verse 14, it says, for the thoughts of mortal men are miserable, and our devices are but uncertain. Verse 15, for the corruptible body presseth down the soul, and the earthly tabernacle weigheth down the mind that museth upon many things, because it's heavy. Our own carnal mind weighs us down. Our own carnal understanding weighs us down, because it's heavy. Especially when we sitting around wasting time thinking and pondering on unnecessary things, vain stuff that profits us nothing. See, we can bring this real close to us. See, we as servants of God, we supposed to be watchful, diligent servants, staying focused in this book, seeking out the things of God daily. But when we not doing that and we distracted and we lose focus, next thing you know, we into something else. Now we sleep just like that because we didn't stay focused. See, we could be sitting there trying to meditate over a scripture, or you might be meditating over a study. Then all of a sudden you lose focus, and now you thinking about random stuff, thinking about your job, thinking about our bills and our concerns in this world, losing focus. Now we over here pondering on our fears and our worries, worrying about the things that we can't control that goes on around us. Musing upon many things. Thinking about what JoJo said to you last week that made you upset. Thinking about the football game and our favorite TV show. Then we can't put our phone down for 2 seconds to even meditate on anything. And just meditate and focus towards the things of God, even things that he made for us to learn from. No, we too worried about what's going on in the world. We caught up in the trends and the distractions of social media. And we'll be into this for hours upon hours upon hours. And do you know how much time we actually waste? This is how quick it is for us to lose focus. Now we sleep. We ain't focused on nothing of God. But this is what happens, because this is how easy it is for flesh to get distracted. Because it's weak. It's weak to temptation. See, then as soon as it's time for us to learn, now we don't know what's going on. Because we too deep into the world. But again, this is the lifestyle of the mortal man. As he tells us, we're gonna go to it again. Wisdom of Solomon chapter 7, verse 1 and 2. It says, I myself also am a mortal man, like unto all, and the offspring of him that was first made of the earth. And in my mother's womb was fashioned to be flesh in the time of 10 months, being compacted in blood in the lifestyle of the seed of man and the pleasure that came with sleep. Because those pleasures that come with sleep are those affections and those desires of the flesh. We're going to see something over here in Genesis chapter 3. I want to show something in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 20. You're going to see something here. And it says what? And Adam called his wife's way Eve, because she was the mother of all living. So being that we all come from Adam, as he said, the offspring of him that was first made of the earth. And we already seen in Psalms 51 and 5, we was all shapen in iniquity, and in sin did our mother conceive us. So we was brought forth in iniquity. Because Eve, which represents the flesh, she's the mother of all living, which is a similitude of the flesh, representing that fruit bearer, bearing these works of the flesh. So it's showing that being in this mortal state, we sit there and we choose fleshly desires over Jehovah's desire. We choose death over life and peace in God. So naturally, our flesh is going to gravitate and find pleasure and sleep in the things of the world. These works of the flesh that are manifest, which brings death and not life. That's why we see all these things here when we go to Galatians chapter 5. In Galatians chapter 5, we hit verse 19 down to 21. It says what? Now, the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, immolations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, rivalings, and such like, of which I tell you before, as I have told you in time past, they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. So those that find pleasure in sleep find pleasure in these things, these works of the flesh, because these are the things that our flesh desires. These are the things that we can see, but it's all vanity. But these temporal things are the very things that are used to destroy us as a people. So if we stay asleep in this world, providing we find pleasure in sleep, we're going to stay in ignorance. We're going to stay in disobedience, and we're going to stay in wickedness. That's why he tells us when we go over here to that's why he tells us when we go over here to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and we hit verse 7. It says what? For they that sleep, sleep in the night. Why? Because they in disobedience. They in wickedness. They in darkness. And we're going to hit 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy chapter 5. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 6. It says what? But she that liveth in pleasure, so she that liveth in pleasure, so liveth in these affections, these desires, and these cravings, is dead while she liveth. So living in our own fleshly cravings and pleasures, the pleasures that come with sleep. That's what I say. We can go back to it. Show us to us. This is the desire of the mortal man. These pleasures that come with sleep. So living in these fleshly cravings, these desires of lust, these affections of the world, these cravings, that ain't no different from being dead, because you living without the spirit, sleepwalking. Our flesh is moving and functioning, but we completely unaware and lack any understanding of our surroundings. Just as a dead body moving without life. We just do whatever the flesh wants and craves after. This is what we do. But he told us, and let's go over here to Proverbs. In Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 13, he told us, it says, love not sleep. So don't promise sleep, lest thou come to poverty. Open thy understandings, and thou shalt be satisfied with knowledge, with bread. But the flesh loves the pleasures that came with sleep. Why? Shoot, it's easier to sleep than it is to get up and study. It's easier to stay asleep than it is to get out your bed and handle your business. So it's no different from enjoying and finding more pleasure from this world rather than finding pleasure in seeking truth, seeking the things to come. So those that love sleep, those that promise it, they trust in ignorance and choose to stay in blindness because they find more pleasure in darkness than they do in the light. So they'll dwell without the light and will stay in lack of understanding, being without form, being void, and in darkness, without wisdom, without direction, without guidance and purpose. Even though we have eyes, we don't use them. This is what our problem is. Same as we can even see right here. Let's look at something here, because we can even see another example of how this actually happens. Let's go over here to John. We're gonna hit John chapter 9, and we're gonna start at verse 31. We're going to hit John chapter 9. We're going to start at verse 31. We're going to take it down for a minute. In John chapter 9, starting at verse 31. And it says, now, we know that God heareth not sinners, but providing any male or female be a worshiper of God, and doeth his will, him he heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man openeth the eyes, open the understandings of one that is born blind? If so, provided this man were not of God, he could do nothing. Watch this. They answered and said unto him, thou was altogether born in sins, and doest thou teach us? And they cast him out. See, this man right here that's speaking, he was actually healed from his blindness and he received his sight. So he was blind to the truth. Spiritually, he was in ignorance, unaware of the truth, living in darkness and in the confusion of this world. So spiritually, he was asleep. But he went through that transformation process from being in his flesh, void of understanding and blind, to receiving truth and wisdom. This is just as all of us at one point. That's why I said we was all brought into this world in sin. We was all brought into this world blind, ignorant to truth, living according to our flesh, unaware of what the truth was until it came to us. And then we received our sight. We received understanding and clarity to see what the truth was. But you can see how they even told him. They said unto him, thou was altogether born in sins, and doest thou teach us? So you can see this. They sitting there saying, how you going to be born? They saying, well, you was born in sin. How you going to teach us? See, this is no different from when we go and we speak with our family members and those that we grew up with. See, they only looking at your flesh. They only look at who you was in the past. They only know you for who you used to be. That's why they sitting there and say, man, you was out here doing this. And I remember when you was out here doing that. You a sinner just like me. You was doing this and you were doing that. How you going to tell me something? How you going to come and try to tell me something? How you going to teach me and you just as bad as I am? Where you get all this knowledge from? Who told you this? Who gave you this understanding? Where you learn that from? This is what happens. But that's the problem, because they only looking at what they see on the outside. They can't see that inward transformation that's actually happening within. Because the only thing that changed is you just changed your lifestyle. You living for God now. See, he opened your eyes to what the truth is and what's right. You're not living in ignorance no more. You aware of what's true and what's false. So you understand that, but they don't. So no matter what, they still blind, because they only looking at what they see and what they knew you to be. That's why they casted him out, because they couldn't understand how he was able to see. Even if you read up and you can see, they asked him, like, how is this man able to see? They couldn't understand it. They couldn't understand how he was able to have this understanding, just as our own people treat us the same way. They're going to cast you out. They're going to reject you and separate from you, because no matter what, they're not going to see that transformation that's actually taking place in you, because they themselves have chosen to remain asleep and ignorant to what's actually true. So we see in verse 35, and Yahweh heard that they had cast him out. And when he had found him, he said unto him, do thou believe on the Son of God? Do thou believe it's on the servant of God? She's saying, do you believe in the word? And he answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And Yahweh said unto him, thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. Why? Because it was Jehovah that was speaking through this man, through Yahweh. It was the word that healed him, that gave him his sight and opened his understandings. It won't no man who did this. Because that's why we can even see when we go to Psalms chapter 146. Psalms chapter 146. And we'll hit verse 8. He tells us, it says what? The Spirit of God openeth the eyes, the understandings of the blind. And the Spirit of God raises up them that are bowed down. And the Spirit of God loveth, so he promiseth the righteous. And he even tell us in Isaiah chapter 42. Isaiah chapter 42 verse 16. It says what? And I will bring the blind by the way that they knew not. And I will lead them in paths that they have not known. And I will make darkness light before them and crooked things straight. These things will I do unto them and not forsake them. Because Jehovah does this. Because it's God's word is what brings light unto us. It changes us. It's what brings us truth and makes crooked things straight before us. This is why we have to depend on Jehovah, the word of God, not on a man. But this is what the problem is, because again, you have these dumb, stupid, blind, sleeping, false pastors that's going to sit there and say, oh, well, Jesus, he touched the blind man and he gave him his vision. This is why they sit there and they like to bring people in these buildings and perform these crazy theatrics. And then they call these things miracles. And people sit there and continue to fall for it, thinking that a man can lay his physical hands on somebody and then somebody going to receive that physical sight. It's stupidity. When Jehovah, he won't even talking about that. That's why I said we compare spiritual things with spiritual. He won't talking about being physically blind. He's talking about those who's living in their ignorance, who don't know the truth, who don't know who Jehovah is, those that was caught up in falsities. That's the blind that he's going to lead in the past that they knew not. But you have these dumb men in these buildings that want to sit there and tell you about these physical carnal things. That's the issue, because they blind themselves. So how can they see anything? But they want to tell you something. But then, same thing, he tell us when we go over here to Baruch. Same thing he tell us when we go over here to Baruch chapter 3. And Baruch chapter 3 and verse 14, it says what? Learn where is wisdom and where is strength, where is understanding, that thou mayest know also where is the length of days in life, where is the light of the eyes, of the understandings, and peace. He's telling us because it's going to come from the word. That's why we can even see when we go over here to Psalms. That's why we can see when we go over here to Psalms chapter 119 and 105. It says what? Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, unto my desires, and a light unto my path. So this is what he's been talking about the entire time. That's what's going to lead us and direct us. The word of God, Jehovah. That's what we have to believe on. That's what's going to give us understanding, not physical sight. Because anyone with eyes can see all day, every day, and still be blind, and still can be without understanding and comprehension. Still blind to the truth. So we can't live by what we physically see, but we have to live by our faith that's in Jehovah, because he's directing the path that's before us. So we get back over here in John chapter 9, we're going to hit verse 38. We're going to take it down to 41. It said, and he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. And Yahweh said, for judgment am I come into this world, and they which see might not see, and they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words, and said unto him, are we blind also? He said unto them, provided you were blind, ye shall have no sin. Yeah, because you would have ceased from your own fleshly works. But now you say, we see. Therefore, your sin remaineth. So these Pharisees, provided they had truth in them, then they would see and have understanding. But because they was blind to truth, but believed that they could see, believing in their own understanding, they remain in sin. They remain in their wickedness and darkness. So they was asleep because they was blind to reality. They blind to what the truth actually is. So that's the point. See, we can't be wise in this world and be filled with Jehovah's wisdom too. It don't work that way. So, in order for us to truly find rest in Jehovah, we have to become dead to this world. So, those that are asleep in Jehovah are those that find true peace and rest in the word of God and not in the world. So, this is what we understand. So, he even tell us, like I said, we can't be caught up in the wisdom of this world and then believe that Jehovah gonna fill us with his wisdom too. That's why he even tell us in 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 18, it says, let no man deceive himself, providing any man among you, male or female among you, seemeth to be wise in this world. Let him become a fool that he may be wise. So we have to let go of all worldly understandings and things that we learned in times past that we thought we knew to be true. This is why if we don't let go of everything, and we don't leave everything behind, and we still holding on to some type of worldly wisdom that some man done taught us, then we think we see when we really blind. So we have to drop all that we think we know and become blind to this world that we might see, that we might receive the truth. Because then Jehovah can fill us and be our eyes, and he can give us his understanding. Now he is going to direct our path. He tells us when we go over here to Psalms. In Psalms chapter 13 and Psalms chapter 13 and verse 3. Psalms chapter 13 and verse 3, and it says, consider and hear me, O Spirit of God, my guide. Lighten my eyes, so lighten my understandings, lest I sleep the sleep of death. So we need Jehovah to lighten our understandings, because remember, if we caught up in our flesh, then we caught up in these worldly distractions, then that makes our understandings heavy. We being burdened by this weak vessel. So we need Jehovah to lighten our understandings. He tell us something in Psalms chapter 119 and Psalms chapter 119, and we'll hit 150. No, verse 50. Sorry about that. Psalms chapter 119 and verse 50. And it says, "This is my comfort in my affliction, for thy word hath quickened me." So this is how we find true rest. How we find true comfort. We have to rest in the word to free us from these burdens and these vain things. Let's go to Psalms chapter 127. Psalms chapter 127 and verse 2. He gonna tell us something. Psalms chapter 127 and verse 2, it says, "It is vain. It is vain for you to rise up early and to sit up late, and to eat and to learn the bread and to learn the knowledge of sorrows. For so he giveth his beloved sleep." So it's vain to sit there, to rise up early and to sit up late, learning the knowledge of sorrows. Because why are we sitting there worrying about everything else and we worrying about our sorrows and our afflictions? All these things that brings heaviness to our mind, that distracts us from where we should be. Because it's going to keep us asleep in darkness in this world rather than resting in Jehovah. Because he even tells us, providing that we learning of him, he is going to give us rest. That's what I'm saying. We can't seek peace. We can't seek rest from this world. The only rest that we can truly find is in Jehovah. That's why he tells us when we go over here to Matthew chapter 11. When we go to Matthew chapter 11 and we hit verse 28 down to verse 30, he tells us what? "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He's saying, I'm going to give you peace. I'm going to give you ease. I'm going to give you comfort. I'm going to give you that assurance. So don't sit there and trust in the things in the world to give you that. He's saying, I'm going to give you that rest. I'm going to give you that ease of mind, that peace and that assurance. But we have to learn of him. We can't stay caught up in everything else. That's why he said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls." See, this is that spiritual rest to our spirit. It's not in our flesh. See, the flesh has to be put to death. So for us to sleep or to have true rest in Jehovah, we must first condemn the flesh. It has to be dead. We have to let go of this carnal mind, because then these fruits now that we producing, we can see in Galatians chapter 5. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 22 down to 23, it says what? "But the fruit of the Spirit is what? Love, joy, peace." See it right there. "Long suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law." Shoot, we had Evangelist Howard. He was speaking of the fruits of the Spirit last night. We got to check up on that. So if but these are the things, it ain't no burden in these. These bring everlasting joy and fulfillment in our lives. So if we are truly resting in Christ, whatever burden that we have, whether it's fear, anxiety, pride, lust, slothfulness, those ain't fruits of the Spirit. You don't see none of those things here. So whatever it is, whatever those burdens are, if we truly resting in Christ, then we have to understand that we got to leave all those things behind. We got to let those things go. And we got to trust that Jehovah, he's going to bring us through it. But if we go back and we pick those things back up, then what? See, that's what we have to truly consider. Why would we go back and pick back up those burdens? When again, he tells us, Sirach chapter 14, verse 14 and 15, "Let go from the mortal thoughts, cast away the burdens of man. Put off now the weak nature, and set aside the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee. Haste thee to flee from these times." So again, fear, anxiety, lust, pride, slothfulness. See, all of these are just some examples, but these are burdens that weighs us down. So why do we continue to pick these things back up? Why do we continue to weary ourselves in these things when Jehovah is saying his burden is light? He already told us, "But my yoke is easy and my burden is light." See, he's offering us eternal peace from these fleshly burdens. So then why do we continue in them? Why do we continue to go back to them and bring heaviness upon ourselves? Why do we continue to go back to our vomit if we saying we trust in God? Can we answer this within ourselves? See, even saying that you're going to stay in your own comfort zone is not true comfort, but it's false security. So staying in fear and in anxiety is not comfort. That's not peace. That's torment. So why do we continue to torment ourselves? That even as he tells us, when we can even see when I go over here to 1 John chapter 4, I want to show us in 1 John chapter 4 and verse 18, because it's a burden to be consumed with fear. It says, there is no fear in love, not in the promise, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. So when we fear to draw closer unto God, and we full of anxiety and always concerned about everything that's going on around us, always questioning things and having doubt, always worrying about what others think, consumed in the vain thoughts of our minds and our fears and our concerns, that's going to torment us. That's torment. It ain't no love in that. You ain't going to find no peace in that, being that way. So why we choose to allow fear to rule over us? We sit back and stay silent. You want to speak up and do what's right, but we choose to stay back, and then we sit there and we regret it later. That's torment. We tormenting ourselves in our own fear because we don't trust in Jehovah. We not trusting in the promise. So what comfort is there in that? All we going to do is stay in our own ignorance. We're never going to move forward and receive the promise, nor find true peace and rest in Christ. So why continue to stay that way? Why continue to be burdened down with that? Why do we even allow our own circumstances and the things around us to disrupt the peace that we supposed to have in Jehovah, when he giving us rest from that, if we truly operating in the spirit? See, I want to even show us an example of this. Let's go over here to Mark. Let's go over here to Mark chapter 4. And Mark chapter 4, and we're going to hit verse 37 down to 40. Mark chapter 4, verse 37 down to 40. It says what? And there arose a great storm of wind. So this is a spirit. So it's letting you know there's a whole bunch of craziness going on. And the waves beat into the ship. So this is all this confusion, all this tumult. So that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship and asleep on a pillow. This speaking of Yahushua. And they that awake him said unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? But he was asleep. And he arose and rebuked the wind. So he rebuked that spirit and said unto the sea, he said unto the people, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? So the same thing here. You have all this confusion and this uproar, all this craziness that was going on. But the thing was, Yahushua, he was asleep. So this is a perfect example of one who's resting in Jehovah. See, he didn't allow the distractions around him to disturb his peace that he actually had in God. So that shows how much faith he had. But his disciples, they was fearful. They was worrying about all the confusion that was going on around them. They was worrying about if they gonna die or not. But again, God, he didn't give us the spirit of fear. That's the point. So the same thing is with us. Why then do we allow ourselves to get all bent up out of shape, and our inner peace that we should have in God gets disrupted? Why do we allow that to become disturbed by our circumstances because of our surroundings? See, just because confusion is around us, it doesn't mean that we have to react to it. See, we should never respond in fear. That's the point. So this shows us one who truly is resting in Christ will not allow the worldly distractions to disturb their inner peace in God. See, we have to learn to cancel out all that noise and all those distractions. But the only way we can truly do this is that if we completely mortify this flesh and if we truly operating in spirit. Because other than that, these fleshly burdens, they going to weigh us down. They going to keep us from resting in Jehovah. See, that's what I'm talking about. These are burdens. The same thing is, we get burdened with lust. Same thing. What's the benefit of it? What's the comfort? Where's the comfort in that? When he tells us in 1 Peter chapter 2, in verse 11, it says what? Dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts, which war against the soul. So what peace is there in fulfilling these temporary sensual desires, only to receive a small moment of pleasure just to go right back to that same unhappiness that you had before? Never truly receiving true fulfillment that love actually brings, but burning constantly in lust. So where's the rest in that? Where's the peace in that? See, our flesh keeps going after the same thing over and over and over and over again, but then your soul finds no peace because you can't ever truly grasp what your soul desires. But you're trying to please yourself in vanity. So we choose to please our flesh. So we sit there and you get your little 10 minutes of pleasure. Then afterwards, now you full of regret. And now you full of sorrow. Wish it never happened. This is what we do. It happens like clockwork. Because you're not being fulfilled, just wasting yourself away. So where is the peace in that? This is what I'm trying to get us to understand. I'm just giving us an example of these burdens that weighs us down, that keeps us asleep, that keeps us from resting in Jehovah. Why do we continue to hold on to these things? Even pride. That's a big one. What do pride profit us? Being caught up in height and arrogance. What profit is it to receive this vain glory and having notoriety and status? Oh, look at me. To receive praise and admiration only for a moment, then it disappears like it's nothing. See, Jehovah's wisdom is far from pride, because providing pride is in us, we will never grow in the truth of God's word. Jehovah's presence will be far from us. See, he draweth nigh to the humble, but the proud he's far from. So we'll never receive true spiritual understanding unless this flesh is put to death. Because he even tell us something when we go over here to Job. I want to show us something in Job chapter 33 so we can see what needs to happen. In Job chapter 33, and we'll hit verse 17, it says what? In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men. So I want us to understand this deep sleep right here is not referring to being slothful or being slack, but this is this heavenly rest. When you cease from doing your own works, when you cease from your own works and your own understanding, then Jehovah can give us instruction and open our understanding. But it's only when we put this flesh to death in a deep sleep and the flesh ain't operating no more and we let go of our own understanding. That's why I say, when deep sleep falleth upon men and the slumber is upon their bed, then he openeth the ears of men and sealeth their instruction, that he may withdraw man from his purpose, from his will, from his desire, and hide pride from man. So, again, why do we stay in pride? Why do we walk around as if we know everything and try to make it seem like we on top of everything, walking with our chest poked out like we all that? When Jehovah, he's going to hide his wisdom from those that are full of pride. Then we sit there and wonder why we can't advance, why we not growing. See, that's a burden. So as long as we stay full of pride, we're going to stay asleep in this flesh and stay blind to truth. Only when a man can truly subdue his own understanding, his own will, and truly submit himself to Jehovah is when then Jehovah can provide him with instruction and with understanding. So we have to put this flesh to rest. So once that happens, now Jehovah can open our ears and give us instruction and teach us and give us clear direction and guidance. So this is what we must do. We have to put all these things off. The same thing with slothfulness, being a sloth. It ain't no rest in that. It might feel like rest, but the more we being idle and being slack and pleasing our fleshly desires and loving the slumber, the more our spirit actually suffers. It's suffering in that. That's why he even tell you in Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 15, it says what? Slothfulness casteth into the deep sleep. See, this is being slothful. This is that spiritual slumber, which causes poverty to the soul. So we should see the difference between these two. And an idle soul shall suffer hunger. So anyone who's here, we shall all recognize when we're hungry physically. See, physically, you recognize when your flesh is hungry because your body going to let you know. So you go eat. So spiritually, we should recognize and understand when our spirit is suffering, when we lacking and we in need. But choosing to not feed your spirit because we want to stay lazy, then again, where's the peace in that? Where's the rest in that? It ain't no peace. You ain't going to find no peace because you always going to know that you lacking and you're going to be burdened in that. That's a heavy burden to be in spiritual poverty. To know you lacking, know you in need, to know you in poverty of spiritual understanding, but you refuse to do anything about it. So all these things I just named, these are just examples of some of these burdens, these heavy burdens that keeps us asleep in this world. So again, I ask the question, why would we continue in these things when Jehovah, once again, he told us, it says what? Matthew chapter 11, again, verse 28 through 30, he says, come unto me. So we know this is the word. This is Jehovah speaking through the mouth of Yahushua. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. So it's light. It's not hard. Because Jehovah, he can release us of all these things that we've been burdened with. So we can't look at this walk, this journey and serving Jehovah. It's not a burden. It's not a burden. See, it's only a burden to those that want to stay yoked and tied to this world, that don't want to do the work. So studying, meditating, and engaging in fellowship, all those things are burdens to you, to those that want to stay asleep and plugged into this world system. So if this walk, if this lifestyle is a burden, then it's a burden to you because you want to stay pleasing your flesh. So you ain't never going to find no peace in it. Only one who can truly find peace is by condemning this flesh and putting it to sleep, putting it to rest, and ceasing from his own fleshly works, and then living in spirit. See, this is what we should actually desire, because then it's not us that live, but now it's Christ that liveth through us. That's why we can see when we go to Galatians chapter 2. In Galatians chapter 2, in verse 20, he tell you, it says what? It says, I am crucified, so I am put to death with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. In the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the servant of God, who promised me and gave himself for me. Because now, providing our flesh is put to death and cease from all fleshly operations, letting go of his own carnal mind, now Christ can truly work in us, having a mind of Christ. Now he can lead us where we desire to be, which is receiving that eternal rest that only God can provide to those who are his true, faithful followers. As he tells us, we're going to hit Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9 down to 11. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9 down to verse 11. And it tells us, it says, there remaineth for that reason a rest to the people of God. See, this is why I made that distinction the entire time in this teaching, from the very beginning of this teaching. Because those who this rest is for, these are for the people of God, the true servants of Jehovah. He ain't talking about everybody. That's the point. For he that is entered into his rest, he also have ceased from his own works, as comparing God did from his. So just as Jehovah rested on the seventh day, representing completion, we must also cease from our own labors and our own deeds in this flesh, in this world. Come into that seventh day, come into completion in Jehovah, and receiving that heavenly rest and that eternal peace that we are actually seeking. It says, let us labor for that reason to enter into that same rest, lest any male or female fall after that same example of unbelief. This is what we don't want. So we should be seeking that eternal rest and that eternal peace in Jehovah's kingdom. So Our lives here in this world shall actually reflect the very life that we are actually seeking eternally. So, our labors. Our labors should be towards eternal riches and peace and prosperity in Jehovah's kingdom, not in the things here of this world. So, those that are asleep in the world will always continue in their fleshly works, and they'll never cease because of their unbelief and never find true peace, but only unfulfilling temporal satisfactions that will eventually fade away. They will always continue to chase behind their own vain imaginations and thoughts of disobedience, choosing to stay in darkness and in ignorance rather than living in light, having no direction or guidance, without purpose, but still operating in the flesh while their eyes remain closed to spiritual understanding, only dwelling in a complete separation from Jehovah's presence. So, to truly rest in Jehovah, we must cease from our own works, from our own carnal works according to this flesh, and put this flesh to rest, and put it to death and let it go, and then labor for eternal riches and spiritual things, because it's not us that live, but it's Christ that lives through us, by being led and guided by Jehovah, seeking that eternal peace with our God. See, this is what we should be looking for, and that should be our focus. So, with that, hopefully we did get some understanding and some edification in this lesson, and we can see and we can understand the difference between being asleep in this world and truly resting in Jehovah. So with that, I'm gonna end this teaching right here. So I like to say I appreciate everyone that came out and tuned in to this lesson. This was Evangelist James with the King James Bible University. And I would like to say, Shalom.